The name on the screen made me freeze. Miss Langford. Our old neighbor. I hadn't heard from her in years. My heart skipped. What could she want now? The message was brief, no greeting, no explanation, just one line: "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today." My stomach dropped. What did she mean? I tapped the video. It was a church. A familiar one, St. Albans. The place we used to go for Christmas Eve services when I was a child. The camera slowly zoomed in on two figures standing at the podium. My parents. My mother in black lace and pearls, dabbing her eyes. My father stood beside her, stiff and solemn, reading from a folded paper. Behind them stood a closed casket, and next to it a large framed photo of me. I stopped breathing. I leaned in, trying to understand. My father's voice came through the phone, clear and rehearsed. She was always a troubled girl, but we loved her. We did everything we could. My knees buckled. It was a eulogy. He was reading my obituary. But I wasn't dead. I was standing in my apartment, alive, heart racing, watching my own funeral unfold on a stranger's phone. The video ended with a slow pan across the pews. Familiar faces. Family. Friends. Even my old piano teacher. All there, dressed in black, mourning someone who wasn't gone. No one had called me. No one had checked. They just buried me. In that moment, a single thought echoed in my mind like a war drum. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And I was going to find out why. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when I believed family meant something: protection, loyalty, love. But that illusion shattered 3 years ago. It all began with a scandal in the family business. Nearly $80,000 went missing from the accounts. My parents ran the books. My younger sister Elena handled the clients. I did the back-end accounting. When the numbers didn't add up and the finances started burning, they needed someone to blame, and I was the easy target. I still remember what my mother whispered in the kitchen, her voice cold and deliberate. Better one ruined daughter than two. My father didn't even look at me. He just said, "You humiliated us. You're no longer our daughter." And that was it. The next morning I was gone. No money, no explanation, just silence. I tried everything: calls, texts, emails. I even wrote letters. No response. My number was blocked. Family friends stopped replying. It was like someone had erased me, as if I never existed at all. So I left. I moved abroad. I took a job in a small cafe. I changed my number. I went offline. I learned to live quietly, to breathe beneath the surface. Even then, a part of me held on. Some tiny flicker of hope that one day someone would reach out. That maybe, just maybe, this had all been a misunderstanding. But that day never came. What did come was something far worse. Last year, I tried to renew an old email account, and the request was denied. When I contacted support, they told me something that made my blood run cold. The account had been deactivated because I was reported deceased. Dead. Not just disowned, not just forgotten. Officially, legally, I no longer existed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the lights off, phone in hand, replaying the funeral video again and again. Every word, every tear, every fake sob from my mother drilled deeper into my chest. They didn't just forget me. They buried me. I had to know the full truth. So I started digging. The first person I called was Aunt Rachel, my mother's older sister. She used to sneak me candy under the table at family dinners. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd tell me what happened. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello? Aunt Rachel, it's me. It's Maya." Silence. Then a click. She hung up. I called again. Blocked. I tried my cousins. One sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Another replied, "Is this a joke?" No one believed it was me. Except one person, my youngest cousin Sam. He had always looked up to me when we were kids. His reply came slowly, "Maya, are you really alive?" "Yes," I typed. "What did they tell everyone?" There was a long pause. Then, "They said you died in a car crash overseas. 3 years ago. Cremated. Closed casket. It was too late to bring you home." I stared at the message. My hands shook. There was no crash. I never even owned a car abroad. I was alive, I had always been alive. Something inside me snapped. I pulled out every document I had: passport stamps, rental records, employment contracts, bank statements. I logged into the public records office and searched for my own name. There it was. Maya Daqua. Date of death, July 16th. Cause, road accident. Status, deceased. Certificate ID, RF91327. They hadn't just lied. They had forged a death certificate. They had made me legally dead to the world. And now I needed to know why. I didn't know what I was looking for next, but I knew where to look. Elena's Instagram. She had gone private for years, but recently she made it public again. Maybe she was proud. Maybe she thought I'd never see it. There it was. Post after post of her wedding. White roses, champagne fountains, a diamond ring the size of a coin, laughter, luxury, lights. Everyone was there, Aunt Rachel smiling like she hadn't just hung up on me, my cousins toasting with flutes of gold-rimmed glasses. Even great Uncle Theo, who never showed up for anything, was front and center. But not me. Not a single mention, not a photo, not even a word like "I wish Maya could have been here." I was completely gone, rewritten. Then I looked closer. In one photo from the reception, a man her new husband stood giving a speech. Next to him was my father, holding a wine glass, smiling wider than I'd seen in years. The caption? To the one daughter who always made us proud. My breath caught in my throat. There it was, the final betrayal. I hadn't just been disowned, I'd been replaced. I checked the business registry, trembling as I typed. My grandfather's trust fund, the college money, the startup funds he'd saved for me, had been quietly transferred to Elena. 6 months after my death. They didn't mourn me. They profited off me. That's when I realized this wasn't just about shame or image. This was about money. My life had been erased for convenience. And that's when I stopped grieving them and started planning my return. If they wanted me dead, then I would haunt them with the truth. They thought they had buried me, but they forgot to make sure I stayed in the ground. The next morning, I walked into a downtown law office with a folder thick with documents and a storm in my chest. Passport stamps, tax filings, employment records, lease agreements, flight logs, proof that I had never died, that I had never even disappeared. The young attorney on the other side of the desk blinked as I slid everything toward him. "You're challenging your own death?" he asked, almost whispering. "I'm not dead," I said flatly, "but I plan to haunt the people who pretended I was." He studied the documents for a long time, then nodded slowly. "We'll start with a fraud complaint and a motion to revoke the declaration of death." I cut him off. "There's no time." He looked up, confused. "Why?" I took out my phone and showed him the message I'd received earlier that day from an unknown number. Just one line. "They're holding a memorial for you next Sunday. At St. Albans. The same church from the video." He sat back in his chair, stunned. I stood. "I'm going." "That might not be safe." I stared at him, eyes unwavering. "They declared me dead. Let's give them the shock of a lifetime." That night, I stood at my apartment window, looking out over the city. The lights below sparkled like broken glass fragments of a life I had pieced back together from nothing. They had buried me in silence, dressed my memory in lies, pretended I never existed. But now I had a stage. Let them gather. Let them cry. Let them perform grief like actors in a play. When the curtain rose, they'd find out the lead character had returned. Not as the daughter they threw away, but as the reckoning they never saw coming. St. Alban had never looked so crowded. Cars lined the street like a funeral parade. People in black stood on the church steps, hugging, whispering, some dabbing eyes behind sunglasses. To the outside world, it looked like a tragedy had struck. I watched it all from across the street. Black coat, sunglasses, still invisible. Inside, the performance had begun. The organ played something slow and mournful. Candles flickered under the same photo they used for the fake obituary. I remembered when it was taken. I was smiling for real that day. Now it was being used to mourn someone who hadn't died. My father stood at the pulpit, voice solemn. She was troubled, but we loved her. She lost her way, and though we couldn't reach her, we never stopped praying she'd come back. A lie smooth as marble. My mother sat front row, dabbing tears with lace-trimmed tissues, like she'd been rehearsing. Her sobs were perfectly timed, delicate. Then Elena. Pearls tight around her neck, clutching them like they were the only thing holding her together. Her voice cracked just right. Maya was complicated, but she was mine. I wish I could have said goodbye. I stepped closer. The priest raised a hand. Let us now stand for a moment of silence. Everyone rose, heads bowed, eyes closed. And I pushed open the doors. The creak of the oak reverberated through the sanctuary like a warning bell. Cold light spilled in, slicing through the dim candlelit aisle. I stepped into it. Click, click, click. Each heel strike echoed on marble like a countdown. Gasps rippled. People turned. A child's voice broke the silence. "Mom, isn't that her?" My mother's face drained of color. Her lips trembled. Then she crumpled into a faint, hard, dramatic. But I wasn't here for her performance. I was here to take the stage. I kept walking. Each step down the aisle felt like thunder. Whispers bloomed like wildfire, gasps stifled cries, the sound of disbelief spreading from pew to pew. Some thought they were seeing a ghost. Maybe they were. I reached the front, stood beneath my own portrait, and turned to face the crowd. Dozens of eyes stared at me, mouths open, some too stunned to even blink. Phones hovered in hands, but no one hit record. Not yet. I cleared my throat. "I heard I died," I said calmly, "but I'm here to correct the story." A ripple went through the room. No one moved. I opened the folder from my coat, thick with documents. I held them high, my voice steady. "These are my passport stamps, my employment records, my lease agreements, my tax filings. I've been alive, working, paying taxes, surviving. The only thing I lost was them." I turned to my parents, who sat frozen. "You told the world I died. You filed fake documents. You made me legally dead." Then I looked at Elena. "You transferred everything to her. My inheritance, my trust fund, my life." Elena's mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. "Don't enjoy the house you bought with my money." A murmur swept through the room. "She's got proof," someone whispered. Another voice rose, "She's not lying." And then, finally, a phone lifted. The red recording light blinked. "Good! Let the world see. Let the lie unravel." "You didn't lose a daughter," I said, locking eyes with my father. "You threw her away. And now you get to watch her walk back in." They dressed me in grief and buried me in silence. But I had returned, not to be mourned but to make them remember. This funeral wasn't for me. It was for their lies. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. My presence alone was the thunder after the storm, the consequence they never imagined would walk through those church doors. My father's face had gone pale. My mother trembled in her seat, her performance completely undone. Elena stood rigid, pearl necklace twisted in her grip, champagne staining her shoes. I turned slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle into every heart in the room. "You buried me to protect yourselves," I said. "But I came back to haunt you with the truth." A silence thicker than any prayer fell over the sanctuary. One by one, the lies they had crafted so carefully cracked open under the weight of evidence, of presence, of voice. I didn't need to scream. I had proof. I held up the forged death certificate. They filed this to the state. A document that claimed I died in a car crash that never happened. I held up a photo. Here's the wedding where my entire family celebrated with money stolen from a ghost. More phones rose. More recording dots blinked. It was no longer a funeral. It was a reckoning. I looked once more at my mother. Her eyes avoided mine. Her hands trembled. I looked at my father, the man who had called me a disgrace and cut me out without a word. He couldn't even look up. I looked at Elena. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time in years she had no words. "Good. Let the world see who they were behind the black dresses and perfect tears. They didn't lose a daughter. They sold one. And now they would live with what they did not in whispers behind closed doors, but on record, in courtrooms, on screens. I smiled softly. This was just the beginning. I walked out of that church as slowly and deliberately as I had entered. Behind me, silence lingered like smoke after a fire. No one followed. No one dared. But the damage was done. Outside, the bells of St. Alban rang solemn and heavy, as if still tolling for the funeral. How fitting. This time they weren't mourning me. They were ringing for the death of the lie. The next morning, I returned to the law office. My attorney was ready. We sat down, and I signed the final page. The forged death certificate, torn in half, right down the middle. My legal resurrection was official. In the days that followed, we filed formal complaints: fraud, false reporting, identity theft, embezzlement. Every document, every timestamp, every trail was handed over. Let them lie again. Let them explain it to the courts. For once, the truth would have more weight than their tears. A week later, the state confirmed my legal status had been restored. I was no longer deceased in their records. I had returned on paper, in body, and in power. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. About reclaiming the voice they tried to silence. The story they tried to rewrite. The life they tried to steal. I no longer needed to prove myself to people who had chosen betrayal over love. I had seen what they were capable of. I had heard their eulogies, their lies, their polished grief. And I had walked through the fire and emerged visible, alive, undeniable. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was something far stronger. They tried to bury me. But they forgot I wasn't soil, I was stone. And stones don't disappear. They stay. They remember. And when the truth is spoken through them, it echoes. I didn't go back to the church. I didn't return to the family home. I didn't reach out to ask why because I already knew. They didn't fake my death because they thought I was gone. They faked it because it was easier than admitting they had sacrificed me. Easier than facing what they'd done. Easier than sharing what was mine. So no, I wasn't coming back to be forgiven. I was coming back to live. To speak. To reclaim everything they tried to take with a signature and a lie. I moved to a new city. A quiet place by the water. I changed my name, not to hide but to start fresh, with no echoes of the past tied to it. The documents are still under review. The investigations are still ongoing. But I sleep soundly now. Because I know who I am. And more importantly, I know who they are. People still ask me, why walk into your own funeral? Because sometimes to be free, you have to let the lie finish breathing. You have to walk into the fire, let it see you, and burn it all down yourself. That day at St. Albans was never about revenge. It was about truth. It was about standing beneath my own photograph, one they chose for me, and saying, I am not your ghost. I am not your shame. I am not your scapegoat. I am here. Alive. And I'm not going anywhere. They held a memorial to bury their guilt. But the only thing buried that day was their illusion. And sometimes, in the ashes of who they thought you were, you find who you've been all along. Not someone they lost. Someone they were never worthy of. This is not a comeback story. This is a resurrection.